What's going on YouTube, and welcome back to Nice Gaming. I'm McGarvin and you're tuned into a brand new episode of Renew or Revoke, where we look at your favorite things, but it's video games. The 80s were a wild time, or so I'm told. I wasn't actually there for it, but after some ironclad internet research, I think I boiled down the essence of the 80s to 3 simple things. 1. Awful hair. 2. That annoying synth riff. And 3. Classic cartoon characters reimagined as babies. Seriously, those shows were everywhere. We had Muppet Babies, Tom and Jerry kids, Flintstone kids. If your dad had a favorite show growing up, chances are the 80s gave it a terrible babyfied makeover. Although maybe that's not fair. I do remember one of those shows standing apart from the others and being really, really good. A pup named Scooby-Doo. But they never made a game of that show, so we're going to talk about the second best show in the genre, Tiny Toon Adventures.
Now I know what you're thinking. Tiny Toon Adventures didn't even come out in the 80s. And you'd be right, but it was close enough, so I'll count it. Released in 1990, Tiny Toon Adventures is the kind of show you'd expect to get if you took the zaniness of the Looney Tunes and gave it a heaping helping of that 90s attitude and aesthetic. As the theme song tells us, the show features the next generation of Looney Tunes attending an academy where they're mentored by an iconic Looney Tunes legend as they work to earn their Toon degrees. And while the Tiny Toons do a good job approximating their Looney Tune counterparts, the Tinies differ enough from the Loonies that each character feels like their own person. Or is that animal? Being? Whatever. In any case, the show features anthology-style shorts that are dripping with hilarious parodies and pop culture references as the show works to answer the age-old question, what would it look like if the Looney Tunes were actually the Animaniacs? And while some of the pop culture callbacks and meta references might be a little dated for the younger crowd, the show's humor has a relatability that allows it to transcend its air date, making it a fun show to revisit. It's not the Looney Tunes show, and to be fair, nothing really is, but Tiny Toon Adventures is a show that holds up extremely well as a Looney Tunes adaptation, and is definitely something worth revisiting even now.
So even though Tiny Toon Adventures only ran from 1990 to 1992, the franchise is a shockingly robust catalog of video games. I counted and they released 19 video games. 19! For a show that only ran for 2 years. That's gotta be some kind of record. But I digress. Today's game is 1993's Buster's Hidden Treasure, developed by Konami. And while I've never played the game before and Konami has a history of being next level scummy, I'm hopeful that there's no next level jank in this game. So let's dive in and see if Buster's Hidden Treasure lives up to its name.
So right off the bat, Buster's Hidden Treasure already wins some brownie points from me, since it's a rare retro game where the story is actually told to you in-game rather than buried in some long-lost manual. Anyway, here's the lowdown. Buster finds a map to a hidden treasure while cleaning out the Acme University attic, but has the map stolen from him by great value Richie Rich, Montana Max. Monty, set on claiming the treasure for himself, hires Dr. Gene Splicer and the walking harassment lawsuit Elmira Duff to kidnap and brainwash Buster's closest friends, including the jelly to his peanut butter, Babs. From there, our fleet-footed hero must traverse the landscape of Acme Acres, reach the treasure before Monty, and save his friends along the way.
From there, it's pretty standard platformer stuff. You play a couple levels in a certain environmental theme, fight a couple bosses, yada yada yada. Nothing really happens from a narrative standpoint for a pretty big stretch here.
After saving Dizzy, Calamity, and Plucky twice, Buster finds himself on an abandoned pirate ship where he learns that he has beaten Monty to the treasure. Monty arrives and he and Buster trade blows before Buster emerges victorious. Monty, ever the sore loser, reveals that he won't release the last of the captured Toons until Buster brings the treasure to his factory on a nearby island, where the two will duel for it. Buster accepts these conditions, not that he had a choice, and with that he is left with one last hill to climb, literally. Buster climbs a mountain, saves Hampton from Dr. Splicer, and finds himself at Monty's stronghold where he clears the hazards, outruns Elmira, and finally arrives for his date with Monty. Our hero emerges victorious, and in a stunning twist of fate, Monty keeps his word, releases Babs, and leaves Buster with his treasure and his friends.
And that's Buster's Hidden Treasure. It's a solid enough story, even though it's low-key just another damsel in distress tale. It's good enough to be the foundation of the game, and it's executed well, especially given the technological limitations. But let's be real, we're not here for a story and a platformer. We're all about the gameplay. And that, just like Onyx, is rock solid.
Buster's Hidden Treasure plays pretty identically to the impossibly long list of side-scrolling mascot platform games that were all the rage in the 90s. That is to say, it's pretty formulaic and not really anything that you haven't seen before. The game features a hub world that spans 33 levels in the various different locales that are the staple of the genre. Underwater, snowy mountains, grasslands, caves, etc. It's a standard platformer where you run, jump, and crouch your way through the level in search of Go-Go Dodo while collecting power-ups, hopping on and off platforms, and avoiding enemies and spike pits. Do that a few times, tango with a boss fight, and you're on to the next level theme.
Like I said, the base element of the gameplay here is pretty paint by numbers. Nothing about the game will freak your mind, but they do a few things differently that I really do appreciate.
Unlike a certain plumber and that one Marsupio, Buster is actually fairly durable in that he won't go down to a single hit. By default, Buster has 3 hearts per level that allow him to sponge an extra pair of hits, and you can even find a power-up in-game that'll grant him up to 2 additional hearts. It's a small thing, but with the lack of checkpoints in these levels, you're going to want as many hearts as you can find. That aside, the game handles collectibles a little differently as well. Where most platformers use collectibles to reward the players by granting them an extra life when they collect a certain number, Buster's Hidden Treasure opts to reward the player with a little extra offense instead. After collecting 50 carrots, Buster gains access to his little helper, where he can call on one of Conquer Condor, Lil Sneezer, or Little Beeper to help clear the screen of every enemy in his line of sight. The helpers don't really do too much early on, but as you enter the late game and the enemy placement becomes much less forgiving, having a nice whirlwind to blow them all away is a welcome addition. Plus, the animation that plays as the helper comes to the rescue is cute as hell. Actually, most of the sprite work in this game is cute as hell.
Unlike that terrible Space Jam game that we talked about before. It's a good video though, you should check it out.
With only a few exceptions, the sprite work here is really well done, and for my money, that starts with Buster. His standard sprite is good, but his action poses are masterful. Maybe it's the way his ears flop like a hound when he crouches, or his face when he's hopping from wall to wall, or when he's sliding into enemies like a runner legging out a home stretch on an RBI. It all looks fantastic. The enemies look good and faithful to their animated counterparts, and the backgrounds, while not the best that I've seen and a little inconsistent in their quality, are more than good enough.
I keep using the word good because that's really the best way to describe a lot of this game. Not great, not bad, good. But Buster's Hidden Treasure is a platformer from the 90s, and something all platformers from the 90s have in common is Jank. Konami, you let me down.
So for the most part, Buster's Hidden Treasure does a good job avoiding bad game design and general jankiness, but there are definitely some moments where the game goes in a weird direction with its design choices. The biggest might just be how weirdly the difficulty spikes out of nowhere. The first few worlds are easy enough, but when you get through the cave section, the game has a pretty noticeable jump in difficulty. Now I know what you're thinking, just get good.
I'm trying!
But no amount of skill can save you from unfair enemy placement, nuisance level concepts, and enemy mechanics that spit in the face of everything you've learned in-game so far.
The volcano segments in this game are brutal. It's like the developers decided, hey, they think it's safe, let's crank this difficulty up to 11 and chap some asses.
Mr. Dick, I'm almost done with the lava levels, and I must say, they're a tremendous pain in the ass.
Good. Now kick him into maximum overdrive.
But sir...
Maximum overdrive!
Believe it or not, the volcano sections aren't even the worst part of the jank. In fact, there are two sections that are way worse, including the game's final level. Or should I say levels. When you get to Monty's factory, the game's final act begins, and you get to play the game's final 3 levels in a row. But here's the rub. If you game over at any point in this 3-level gauntlet, you're thrust back to the first level to restart the challenge. What makes it extra devastating to restart is how the levels are both hard and long.
I guess we're not doing phrasing anymore?
From personal experience, there is no worse hell than struggling through the first 2 levels, only to lose your life within 3 seconds of starting Elmira's chase sequence in the 3rd level.
I lost an hour and 6 minutes of gameplay because of this. I straight up almost cried.
Almost.
But I get it though. It's the game's epic finale, so it can't be too easy. But you can't use that same excuse for what I find to be the most annoying levels in this game, the mountains. Anyone who's ever played a platformer can tell you, without fail, snow levels are always the worst. Ice physics are awful, and gaining traction is always a pain in the ass, and the mountain levels of Buster's Hidden Treasure are no exception. Buster feels like he's running in mud when he tries to pick up speed, and when he stops, he slides for a quick second. It's not a big slide, but it's enough to throw off your timing and send you careening off a platform and into a spiked pit if you're not careful. And therein lies my second gripe with the mountain levels. Most of these levels are filled with spiked pits that require precise platforming, but with the wonky ice physics, you can already see why that won't work. It's so frustrating to try to maneuver, and once again, I'd love to know why someone would design a series of levels like this.
Sir, we're almost done with the game. Just need to know what you want to do with the snow levels.
Make them as unpleasant as possible.
But why?
Because someday, there's gonna be a handsome young devil with flowing locks that's gonna want to review this game for his YouTube channel. And we're gonna make him pay for it.
On the whole, I think it's more than fair to call Buster's Hidden Treasure a good game. It looks good, plays smoothly, and minus a few late game design flaws, I think it's executed really well and mostly avoids the pitfalls that plenty of other 90s era platformers fell into. It's not too long, nor is it too difficult, and it does a good job bringing that Tiny Toon charm to your Sega Genesis. When deciding whether or not Buster's Hidden Treasure was worth a renew, the question I kept asking myself is good good enough? And I think the answer to that is yeah. So with that, Tiny Toon Adventures, Buster's Hidden Treasure earns a renew. The game isn't going to blow you away, and it doesn't do anything to push the genre into uncharted territory, but as far as I'm concerned, it does almost everything right, and what it gets wrong isn't egregious enough to overshadow what it does right.
This game legitimately surprised me. It was pretty fun, it looks pretty good, and it aged really well. Kinda like Nia Long. Personally, I really like this trip down memory lane to some really old school classics and wanted to keep the nostalgia going by reviewing Rugrats in Paris for the N64 next time. Unfortunately, my N64 died as we were recording this, and since buying a new one will cost me an arm and a leg, I've been looking into some alternative methods for repairing it. So join us next time as we learn a little alchemy and try to revive my beloved N64. Thank you for watching, and if you like what you saw, leave us a like, comment, and please subscribe. Ring that bell to stay up to date, and until next time, stay nice.